Citlali has been out for a couple of days now, and since I've had the chance to properly test her out more extensively, I thought I'd deliver my more fleshed out thoughts on the character, evaluate whether my pre-release pros and cons were accurate or not, and give my opinion on where I currently think she stands in the meta. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. So in my initial video about the crazed grandmother, I mentioned how she'd effectively be able to buff forward melt teams, aka comps in which there is a pyro DPS applying their element on top of cryo application. Did this end up being the case? Allow me to be the first to say, yes! In fact, she's 100% the best forward melt buffer in the game. It's not even close. To be completely fair though, that's setting the bar incredibly low, because we didn't have any dedicated forward melt buffers before Granny Itzli's release. However, with that being said, she's not just the best due to the process of elimination, she's also a genuinely really solid unit that provides a lot to the team. Take a look at that juicy A1 of hers, 20% shred to pyro, don't you love to see it? Ah, Hydro Res 2? I think Hoya vs Hydro Dragon bias was made obvious months ago, honestly. Why am I even surprised anymore? Ah, whatever. Back to good old forward melt. She doesn't apply enough cryo from Moika to melt literally every single hit, but you'll still be able to land the mark on most hits with her. This isn't even mentioning the other pyro DPSs that she can utilize. Citlali's the best in slot forward melt support for them all. Let's not forget about her ability to hold 4-piece instructors either. Yep, she's able to offer immediate EM boost to the entire team if needs be. Considering how, for whatever reason, Hoyo refuses to add other supportive Notlon sets, you're probably sick of equipping your 15 unit with 4-piece Cinder City. However, you can slap this crazed granny on instructors to circumvent that. There's Tenacity too, but I really wanted to highlight Tenacity seeing as EM is so important with her primary teams. I feel super vindicated by all of this. I've practically screamed from the rooftops, Hoyo, let melt be good, because the multipliers were there. It could be an actual competitor to Vape. Which, to be frank, much needed. Every new pyro DPS tends to be a vaporizer these days, even when Hoyo attempts to steer them in another direction, so this variety in team building is much appreciated. I'd also like to add how I like that she's filling a role that no other character is really bothering with at the moment, that being supporting forward melt specifically. Excellent for this role, definitely opens up more unique team comps to try. Previously, I seriously hyped up the fact that Citlali was going to be the rare case of a cryo unit being actually somewhat competent in today's meta. The funny thing is that I actually think that our girl Ganyu got a leg up in the meta thanks to Moika. However, with that being said, that doesn't change the fact that Citlali is in fact a very refreshing release due to her being a good cryo unit. I'm happy to see that this element appears to slowly be making some progress, one Coco Goat and insane grandmother at a time. I will say that I'm seriously annoyed at how little she does for cryos themselves. The Exalted Pyro Archon sorted that out for us by providing us all with her legendary Pyro Ring, yet with that being said, kinda funny how the first cryo release that we've gotten in ages is one that doesn't even benefit the element itself all that much. But hey, at least she ended up being good. Sure, she might not end up being a direct buffer to the characters of the element itself, however, being a valuable member of it is still relevant. After all, she aids in forward melt comps, and her cryo application wouldn't be possible if she was a freaking Dendro unit or something. Either way, I'm happy to see this. It brings me hope for the future, as we might be seeing a resurgence in good cryos again. All regulars of mine are aware that it's my favorite element in the entire game, and that has been the case for years now. Here's hoping that Citlali is the start of a new norm, not only acting as a mere exception. I pointed out how the all-powerful Shaman of the Nightwind tribe would prove to be quite the formidable offensive shielder. Essentially, not all of her value is packed within her shield. It'd be foolish to think so, since in my opinion, her real value lies in her ability to offer more offensive utilities to your team. If you have no Cinder City holder in your team, then Citlali fits in that role perfectly well. Which is pretty relevant when you realize that she can actually act as a competent Shieldin replacement in both Celestia Killer Novelette and any Pyro main DPS team. I've already ran over the glory of instructors and provided Tenacity a brief mention, so let's move on to her other offensive qualities, why don't we? For instance, she's able to hold TDDS. If you're okay with having less personal damage on your crazed granny, as HP percent does nothing for this purely EM scaling unit, then you're able to utilize this cheap, accessible option as a means to buff your DPS's attack percent by a sizable amount. Very relevant when you consider that the honorary son of Caledon Moika is one of her best synergies. I'd also like to properly correct myself in regards to sacrificial fragments. I did indeed praise the EM that it provides or cranky Granny Itzli. However, I failed to highlight why the passive is actually pretty cool. Plenty of you told me that I undersold it, so I appreciate you guys telling me that. Essentially, she generates 4 cryo particles per skill, and sac frags can let you generate 4 more, therefore summing up to 8 in total at the cost of not that much more field time. And when you consider that her main source of personal damage comes from her elemental burst, yeah, it ends up being pretty good. And that's another thing, personal damage. It's not anything insanely epic, I wouldn't necessarily get up and break into song over it. However, it adds yet more layers to this Shielder's kit that allow her to offer multiple different qualities. The nice thing is that even if it's not a massive amount of damage, it's still enough to the point where you can appreciate it. I enjoy that it's not a case of jack of all trades, master of none. Oh, no, no, no. Citlali achieves everything that she sets out to do perfectly well, so for those reasons, I believe that this pro aged very well. I talked about how this character wouldn't be an entirely restrictive option either. What I mean by that is that most not-long characters have some form of awkward restrictiveness in their kit. For example, Autodron wanting to play in either taser teams or comps that are capable of generating frequent Night Soul bursts, or how Moika's DPS-based teams have practically taken Shilonen's hand in marriage at this point. Granny Itzli fears no such things. Yes, she wants to play with power damage dealers, but that's a far more broad statement than, you need either normal attacks or Night Soul consumption to happen in your team. Besides, I'm happy that she's still allocated to a certain niche, because if every character was an insane must-pull support, that would just end up becoming super unsustainable for you as a player. She's very well geared towards the audience who would find use out of her, if that makes sense. Pyro fans are definitely thriving out here. This isn't even mentioning how neat she is with Hydros either. The main noteworthy synergy is pairing her with Mr. Settle Down due to the Hydro Red Shred. Considering how highly contested the DJ cat is these days, a way to free her up is greatly appreciated. Kachina achieved that job just fine before, but Citlali's a neat step up from that. So yes, she does indeed have a niche. However, she is far less restrictive than other not-long characters within said niches. For example, Arlecchino and Moika are both Pyro DPSs. However, I think most would agree with me when I say that Favre is far more versatile teams-wise compared to the exalted Pyro Archon who eats Night Soul for breakfast. How else do you think she's strong enough to take on the Might of the Abyss? Considering how gimmick-infested recent units have been, this is a very welcome change of pace. In my opinion, she actually has potential to survive far on after Notlon's main patch cycle ends. Think about it. She's literally the only dedicated buffer for her specific niche at this point in time. The more specific a unit is, the less likely they are to get replaced immediately, so I can envision a super fruitful shelf life for her. One con that I stated in regards to Citlali was that she doesn't buff reverse melt. This is the opposite of forward melt. Essentially, when a cryo character applies cryo on top of pyro in order to trigger a melt. Think like Melt Ganyu or Riesli melt teams. To be honest, this can't really be attributed as a con towards her kit, because it doesn't really have anything to do with the quality of what was actually put into the game. It's more or less just musing about what could have been, and getting kinda salty over that. Yes, I do think it's annoying that Hoyo didn't add Cryo Red Shred to her kit too. A Melt Ganyu shielder sounds fire as all heck, especially considering her current great synergy with Moika. Imagine if we could have used Granny Itzli as that team's 4th slot instead of Shilonen. Would have been far comfier in my opinion. With that being said, the Coco Goat has indeed seen a redemption with the Pyro Archon's release, so I still got what I wanted in a sense, just not through the means of which I expected, so I can't complain too much. Crowd DPSs themselves did get a nice bone thrown to them with the character that Citlali is currently partnered with on banners. With that being said, this does still irk me a bit. Even so, the con doesn't matter all that much, because it's not that relevant as to how good her kit is. Another con which I stated was that she wouldn't really fit into this healer-based meta of ours. To be honest, I think she's fine. Most of the teams that she can work in use another healer already anyway, such as Bennett or Shilonen. Your fanfare generation won't really be harmed. With that being said, Citlali can easily replace our beloved Lady Farina in plenty of Pyro DPS-based teams too, if you'd like to free her up for the other half. I did say to take this con with a massive grain of salt in fairness, and in hindsight, I do so hope that salt was indeed pinched from the bowl, since this seriously did not affect her meta position at all. Sure, she's a shielder, but literally everyone and their leg-breaking grandmother has ended up using her primarily for her A1 in Cinder City or instructors first and foremost. And now for the moment that we've all been waiting for. Where do I currently think that Citlali stands in the meta? To me, she's not necessarily meta-shattering, but she's 100% a step in the right direction in terms of kit design and power level. She excels at her niche, while still being very broadly accessible within that niche. Her power is of course not to be underestimated, as she is the almighty and revered Granny Itzli. With that being said, yes, her power level is genuinely very, very solid. Certainly an impressive unit that you can justify pulling for if you main any Pyro DPS. Or if you're a Novalet main looking to free up your DJ Cat for another team. The Nightwind's greatest shaman absolutely delivered on what she was going for with her kit. I say she's a success kit design-wise, because instead of replacing a unit that came out 5 patches ago, looking at you, Moika, she filled in a meta gap that really needed filling. Not one really has been the region of gap fills, if you will. A full country in which they release characters of archetypes that they've been ignoring for years at this point. Burn Vape, Burning, Soup Teams and Infusions, and now Forward Melt. I'm eagerly awaiting the day that they drop a reverse melt support of a similar quality. I will be there for that character's release. If that'll ever happen, Culpium. Definitely let me know about what you think of Citlali down below in the comments. Does she meet your expectations or not? Why? Let me know down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. As always, I have a ZZZ second channel. Head on over and subscribe if you're interested in some fun, silly ZZZ content. Hopefully this video was able to tell you my more developed opinions on Citlali now that we've had her out for a while. This has been Juice, signing out, and I really wonder what a conversation between Citlali and Farazan would look like.